Hello, everyone. We hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're about to discover the heartbreaking truth that leaves Jack completely speechless as the doctor reveals that Tu Tien was never pregnant. How will the couple overcome the devastating news after dreaming of becoming parents? Stay with us until the very end to find out. And if you enjoy emotional stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss our upcoming videos. The examination room fell into complete silence. Jack could hear nothing except the sound of his own heartbeat. The doctor's words lingered heavily in the air. "I'm very sorry. There's something the two of you need to prepare yourselves for." Neither Jack nor Tu Tien could bring themselves to speak. Their fingers remained tightly intertwined, as if letting go for even a second would cause everything around them to collapse. The doctor slowly gestured toward the consultation room. "Please, come inside." Jack helped Tu Tien to her feet. Her legs felt strangely weak. Every step toward the doctor's office seemed heavier than the last. The door quietly closed behind them. The doctor placed the medical file onto his desk before taking a slow breath. "I know the last few days have been emotionally overwhelming. And because of that, I want to explain everything very carefully." Jack nodded. His throat felt too dry to answer. The doctor opened the folder and spread several reports across the desk. One contained the blood test. Another showed the ultrasound images. He pointed gently toward the first page. "When you first came here, you had several symptoms that are commonly associated with early pregnancy." He continued calmly. "Morning nausea, sensitivity to strong smells, a delayed menstrual cycle, fatigue, changes in appetite. Taken together, these signs certainly raised our suspicion." Jack remained completely still. The doctor continued. "The initial blood test also showed a hormone level that wasn't entirely normal. It wasn't high enough for us to confirm pregnancy, but it also wasn't low enough to completely rule it out. That's why I specifically asked both of you to return for another examination before sharing the news with your family." Tu Tien slowly lowered her eyes. She remembered every hopeful conversation they had shared over the past several days. Every dream, every smile, every tiny plan for the future. The doctor gently pushed the second report toward them. "Today's results are much clearer." We repeated the blood analysis. We also performed another ultrasound. And after comparing everything, he paused, then quietly delivered the truth. "You are not pregnant." The room instantly became silent again. This time, the silence felt unbearable. Jack stared blankly at the report in front of him. Although he had been preparing himself for every possible outcome, actually hearing those words felt completely different. His mind suddenly became empty. He couldn't think. He couldn't speak. Across from him, Tu Tien sat perfectly still. She stared at the floor without blinking. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. The doctor allowed them time to process the news before continuing. "I understand this is painful, but I'd also like you to understand why your body reacted this way." He gently folded his hands together. "Tu Tien, have you been working very hard these past few months?" She nodded quietly. "I have. I've been helping with the business and taking care of the house. I haven't been sleeping very well either." The doctor gave a sympathetic smile. "That explains a great deal." He pointed toward another section of the report. "Your hormone levels have been significantly affected by prolonged physical exhaustion, stress, irregular sleep, and nutritional imbalance. Together, they caused an endocrine disorder. He continued explaining patiently. An endocrine imbalance can produce symptoms that closely resemble early pregnancy. Nausea, missed periods, heightened sensitivity to smells, even emotional changes. Jack finally looked up. So, she was never pregnant? The doctor slowly shook his head. No. There was never a developing pregnancy. The first examination simply wasn't able to give us a definitive answer, which is exactly why we avoided making any final conclusion. Jack closed his eyes. He remembered every morning he had woken before sunrise, every breakfast he had carefully prepared, every article he had read, every moment spent imagining a tiny crib inside the spare bedroom. None of it had been wasted, but somehow, his heart still felt unbearably heavy. Beside him, a quiet sob suddenly broke the silence. Jack immediately turned. Tu Tien's shoulders were trembling. Tears slowly rolled down her cheeks before falling onto her hands. She tried desperately to wipe them away, but more continued to fall. She could barely finish the sentence. I'm sorry. Jack looked at her in confusion. She shook her head repeatedly. I'm so sorry. I let you believe. I let you hope. Her voice completely broke. You were so happy. You changed everything. You took care of me every single day. And in the end, it wasn't true. Jack immediately reached for her hands. Tu Tien. But she continued crying. I even started imagining our baby. I imagined that little room. I imagined telling our parents. I imagined... She covered her face. I feel like I disappointed everyone. Jack gently squeezed her trembling fingers. You didn't disappoint anyone. She slowly looked at him through tear-filled eyes. I didn't? He shook his head without hesitation. Never. The doctor quietly stood and stepped toward the window, allowing the couple a moment of privacy. Jack carefully brushed a tear from Tu Tien's cheek. Listen to me. I never wanted a child badly enough to risk your health. She stared silently at him. He smiled sadly. If someone had asked me to choose between having a baby and keeping you healthy, I would choose you every single time, without even thinking, without hesitation, every single time. Fresh tears streamed down her face. But you were so excited. I know. I still am. But not because of a baby. He gently rested one hand over hers. I'm excited about spending my life with you. Children, they're a blessing. But you're my family first. If you're not healthy, nothing else matters. Tu Tien completely broke down. She leaned forward and buried her face against his shoulder. Jack wrapped both arms around her without saying another word. Sometimes, silence comforted more than any explanation ever could. Several minutes later, the doctor quietly returned to his chair. I'd like to discuss your treatment plan. Tu Tien slowly sat upright, wiping away the remaining tears. The doctor spoke reassuringly. The good news is that this condition is completely treatable. Jack immediately listened carefully. What should we do? First, she needs proper rest. No more overworking. No skipping meals. No staying awake late into the night. He continued. I'll prescribe medication to help regulate her hormones. In addition, I strongly recommend improving her nutrition, regular exercise, and reducing emotional stress. Jack nodded after every sentence, as though memorizing every single word. The doctor smiled gently. If she follows the treatment properly, I expect her hormone levels to recover. And once her body returns to normal, there should be no reason she can't become pregnant in the future. Jack immediately looked up. So, there is still hope? The doctor smiled warmly. Of course. I've seen many couples experience exactly the same situation. The important thing is not to rush. Your family hasn't lost anything. Your timing simply isn't today. Those words settled quietly inside the room. For the first time since hearing the diagnosis, Jack felt his chest loosen ever so slightly. It wasn't the ending they had dreamed about, but perhaps it wasn't the end of their dream either. When they finally left the consultation room, neither of them spoke. The bustling hallway outside the hospital felt strangely distant. Doctors walked briskly from one department to another. Nurses called patients' names. Families waited anxiously outside examination rooms. Life around them continued exactly as it always had. Yet for Jack and Tu Tien, everything felt completely different. Jack quietly carried the small paper bag containing her medication, while Tu Tien walked beside him with her eyes fixed on the floor. Neither of them had the strength to begin a conversation. The elevator doors opened. Several people stepped inside. A young couple entered just before the doors closed. The woman gently rested one hand over her visibly pregnant belly while her husband carefully supported her arm. They smiled at each other as they whispered something only the two of them could hear. Jack instinctively glanced toward Tu Tien. She had noticed them too. Her lips trembled slightly before she quietly turned away. The elevator ride lasted less than a minute. To both of them, it felt much longer. Outside, the afternoon sky had become gray. Dark clouds slowly drifted across the horizon. A cool breeze swept through the hospital parking lot. Jack unlocked the car but didn't start the engine immediately. Instead, he simply sat behind the steering wheel. His hands rested quietly on it. Neither of them moved. Finally, Tu Tien spoke. "I'm sorry." Jack immediately shook his head. "No, but..." She couldn't continue. Her voice cracked again. "I really thought..." "So did I," he answered softly. Neither of them looked at one another. They simply stared through the windshield. After several quiet moments, Jack finally started the car. The drive home felt completely different from every journey they had shared over the past week. The cheerful conversations were gone. The laughter had disappeared. Only the soft sound of the engine filled the silence. Halfway home, Jack noticed a familiar children's boutique on the side of the road. Only a few days earlier, he had stopped there without telling Tu Tien. Inside, he had purchased the tiniest pair of white baby shoes. He hadn't intended to buy them. He had simply walked past the display window, then imagined a little child wearing them someday. Without thinking, he had brought them home. Now, as the shop slowly disappeared in the rearview mirror, he tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Tu Tien quietly noticed. She understood exactly what he had remembered. Neither of them mentioned it. When they finally arrived home, the familiar house felt unusually quiet. Even Vang, who normally ran excitedly toward them, approached more gently than usual. She wagged her tail before resting beside Tu Tien's feet. The tiny puppies stumbled after their mother, playfully tumbling over one another. Only yesterday, watching them had filled the couple with excitement. Today, the sight only deepened the silence. Jack slowly walked inside. He placed the medication on the kitchen table, then stood still. His eyes wandered around the room. The breakfast table where he had proudly served soup every morning. The chair where he had spent hours reading books about pregnancy. The notebook filled with baby names still rested on the coffee table. Everything remained exactly where it had been. Only the future they had imagined had quietly disappeared. Without saying a word, Jack picked up the notebook. He looked at the pages one last time. Each carefully written name, each small note, each dream. He slowly closed it, then placed it inside a drawer. Not because he wanted to throw it away, only because looking at it hurt too much. Next, he opened the kitchen cabinet. Inside sat several unopened boxes of prenatal vitamins. He carefully gathered them together. Beside them were cartons of milk he had specifically chosen after reading articles about nutrition for expecting mothers. He gently placed everything into a paper bag. His movements were slow, almost mechanical. There was no anger, no frustration, only quiet disappointment. Upstairs, Tu Tien entered the bedroom alone. She sat on the edge of the bed without moving. Her eyes slowly drifted toward the wardrobe. Inside one drawer lay several loose maternity clothes she had secretly purchased online. She had never shown Jack. She had wanted to surprise him later. Now, she quietly took them out one by one. Her fingers brushed across the soft fabric. A tear landed on the folded dress. She hugged the clothes tightly against her chest, then slowly placed them back inside the drawer, closing it gently, as if closing away a dream she wasn't ready to abandon. Several minutes later, she walked downstairs. Jack was standing in the storage room. She stopped in the doorway. He didn't notice her. On the shelf sat another small paper bag. He carefully reached inside, then slowly pulled out the tiny white baby shoes, the ones he had secretly bought. They looked impossibly small, resting in his large hands. For several seconds, he simply stared at them. His expression remained calm, but his eyes slowly reddened. Tu Tien covered her mouth. She hadn't known. She hadn't known he had already gone that far. Jack quietly returned the shoes to the box, carefully folded the wrapping paper, closed the lid, then placed the box on the highest shelf, as though protecting something precious, even if no one would ever use it. He finally turned around. Only then did he see Tu Tien standing there. Neither of them spoke. She slowly walked toward him. "I'm sorry." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Jack immediately stepped closer. "You don't need to apologize. I made you dream." "You didn't." "I let myself dream." She looked at the closed box on the shelf. "You even bought shoes." He smiled faintly. "I couldn't help myself." I walked past the store and imagined tiny footsteps running through this house. His smile slowly faded. "I guess I got carried away." Tu Tien suddenly wrapped both arms around him. "I'm so sorry." Jack held her gently. "No. The doctor already explained everything. This wasn't anyone's fault." She buried her face against his chest. "But I still feel guilty." "I know. And you're allowed to feel sad. So am I. But sadness doesn't mean we've lost everything." She slowly looked up. His eyes were still moist, yet his voice remained steady. "We just need time." That evening, neither of them felt hungry. Jack still prepared a simple dinner, mostly because he knew the doctor had insisted Tu Tien should never skip meals again. She forced herself to eat a few bites. Jack did the same. Neither of them tasted the food. After dinner, they quietly cleaned the kitchen together. For the first time in many days, Jack allowed Tu Tien to wash a few dishes beside him. Neither of them argued about it. They simply stood side by side, working together, like they always had before hope had briefly changed their routines. Night slowly settled over the neighborhood. The lights inside nearby homes flickered on one after another, somewhere in the distance. Children laughed as they played outside. The sound drifted gently through the evening air. Tu Tien quietly stepped onto the front porch. She wrapped her arms around herself. The cool night breeze brushed against her face. Above her, thousands of stars slowly appeared across the dark sky. She sat alone on the wooden steps. Tears silently rolled down her cheeks. She didn't make a sound. She didn't want Jack to worry. For several minutes, she simply cried quietly beneath the stars. Then, she felt something warm settle gently across her shoulders. Jack had placed his jacket around her. He sat down beside her without saying a word. The two of them looked up at the night sky together. After a long silence, Jack finally spoke. "You know," she turned toward him, "our child might come later than we hoped." He smiled gently. "And that's okay." She listened quietly. "The only thing I truly need is for you to stay healthy." He reached for her hand. "I can wait. We can both wait, as long as we're waiting together." Fresh tears filled Tu Tien's eyes once again. This time, they weren't only tears of sadness. She leaned against his shoulder. Jack rested his head gently against hers. The cool breeze continued moving through the quiet garden. Nearby, Vang gathered her puppies close before they slowly drifted to sleep. Jack watched the little family with a peaceful smile, then softly whispered, "Our story isn't over. It's only taking a different path." Tu Tien squeezed his hand tightly. For the first time that day, she managed a small smile. Perhaps dreams sometimes arrived later than expected. Perhaps hope occasionally needed to survive disappointment before becoming something stronger. And perhaps the greatest blessing they already possessed was not the promise of a child, but the unwavering love that refused to leave, even after heartbreak. As the stars shone quietly above them, Jack gently pulled Tu Tien closer. Together they faced the silent night, not with certainty but with courage. Because after a devastating truth that nearly shattered both of their hearts, the question remained, would their love be strong enough to carry them through one more season of waiting, and one day finally lead them to the family they had never stopped dreaming about? Jack and Tu Tien returned to the hospital hoping to confirm their dream of becoming parents. But the doctor delivers a heartbreaking truth. Tu Tien is not pregnant. Her symptoms were caused by exhaustion, stress, and an endocrine disorder. Jack is left speechless, while Tu Tien breaks down in guilt for letting him hope. Back home, Jack quietly puts away the milk, vitamins, baby name notebook, and tiny shoes he had secretly bought. That night, Tu Tien cries alone on the porch until Jack gently comforts her and reminds her that their love and her health matter most.